Hey, I'm doing inflation in several installments because the whiteboard simply isn't big enough to contain all these things, and you really need to understand this both for national policy and for your own personal life. So, we're going to get into a more real world example here of what's going on and the effects of inflation. So, if you take a look at a cheeseburger, everyone knows what that is, and in this example, it costs $1. Now, I don't want to pay $1 right now, so I'm going to offer someone out there the chance to loan me money. I'll say, hey, I will pay you 10% interest. 10% interest. I mean, right now in the bank, you're earning like 1/10%. So this is like 100 times more than you would get at a bank. So someone's going to take me up on the deal. And so I'm going to pay you back $1.10 in the future. That's at 10% interest. Okay? So I pay you back $1.10 a year later because interest is always by law calculated on a yearly basis, okay? So my 10%, you're going to get 10 cents. You think, well, big deal, whatever. Okay. So I give you $1.10 next year. And you say to yourself, hey, well, that's great. Now that I have $1, I'm going to go buy a cheeseburger and I've got an extra 10 cents. So I'm a pretty smart business person. Well, but here's the thing. Due to inflation, the cheeseburger now costs $1.39. So the inflation rate went up faster than your interest rate went up. So you made, nominal terms, 10%. But you didn't make it in real terms. In fact, you actually lost money? No, you have more money. What you lost was purchasing power. So the money you have doesn't buy as much stuff. So it almost feels like the dollar went down in value. Now the dollar didn't go down in value, it went down in purchasing power. The problem is people like to mix those things up and they say it's devaluing the dollar. Well, what's devalued is your purchasing power. The dollar buys less stuff. So, in our example here, who won in this exchange? Well, I did. See, I got a cheeseburger for $1 now, and I pay you back with $1.10, but I'm paying you back in currency that doesn't buy the same cheeseburger that it would have bought last year. So I got the real goods, and I'm paying you back with currency that won't buy the same real goods, even though I'm paying you more currency. Does that make sense? Okay, so I got the burger and paid you back with devalued dollars. And hopefully you'll get this. We'll do it again and again because this is very important. I made money, or I made value, I guess, on the debt. So what you need to understand is that inflation is a negative to savings. You remember in our last episodes that we talked about stocks and bonds and savings accounts. And if you make, 1% in your savings, but inflation is 2, it's like a -1. If inflation is a negative to savings, then inflation is a positive to debt. Okay? If inflation is a negative to savings, it is a positive to debt. So what a lot of rich people understand is you don't use money to buy things, you use debt to buy things, and then you pray for the inflation to turn it into something positive. So if this is how the rich people are getting rich, and they're also the ones that are controlling places like Congress and the presidency, and if you know who these people are, you can see what kind of programs are going to push. And they've been pretty forthcoming about it. I mean, the Federal Reserve, our central bank, has been saying we'd like to target 2% inflation. So their goal is that all their policies are going to be geared towards 2% inflation. I know what's coming. 2% inflation, at least. Okay? So that's why I've been using the 2%, because it's their stated target goal. And it might be more than that. All right. And in fact, if you can convince the people it's small, then you can get away with it by doing more inflation and then you control all the assets and you pay that debt back with inflated currency, wow, you can really get rich doing this. Okay? So let's pick an example. See, I majored in economics, so I understand this. And so once I got enough money for a down payment, I started buying houses. Let's take a look over here. In the real world, I would borrow $100,000 for a home. Okay? I didn't have that money. I would coach, a basketball and tennis, and I never spent it. I would just save it. And after a couple years, I'd get enough for a down payment, and then I'd borrow the rest. I'd just borrow it. Okay? I would borrow it and pay the bank back over 30 years. So I signed up for a 30-year mortgage. Way out there, right? Inflation then devalues the dollars I'm paying back to the bank over time. So I'm not paying them dollars in nominal terms. It looks like a flat line going across. Okay, I'm paying the same amount on my mortgage every month, but the thing is, with that inflation eating away at its purchasing power, its real purchasing power quickly goes down. So in nominal dollars, it looks like a flat line, but in real dollars, my debt is getting cheaper and cheaper every year by at least the 2% inflation rate, or then the shadow stats, what the real rate is, 5, 10, 12, I don't know, but it's certainly not zero. If we had 0% inflation, then it would hold its value all the way across and my debt would be equal all the way, but that's not the case. It goes down over time. And that's the game I'm playing, because that's the game that's being dealt out in the world today. All right? So inflation devalues those dollars over time. You use debt to get stuff. Could be a house, could be a cheeseburger. Right? And then you pay it back with increasingly worthless dollars. Pretty nice, isn't it? So I can get the cheeseburger now with the money, and then next year I can pay you back with not so good money. It's been devalued by inflation, and okay, you're left holding a bunch of pieces of paper, but they don't buy the thing I got last year. Even though you have more, $1.10 and $1, you still can't buy the cheeseburger. Same thing with the house. The only difference from this example to that example is a bunch of zeros after the number. So instead of $1, it's 100,000. That's the only difference between these two examples. So that means my debt ends up being a positive. Inflation affects it in a positive way. It reduces the burden of debt that I have. And so it was hard at first to start my rental business, but as the years went by, it just got easier and easier and easier, because the dollars I had to come up with got cheaper and cheaper to find. They weren't that valuable. And I said, here you go, bank, here's, hundreds of dollars, and it didn't matter much. When I first started, it was like, that was a lot of money. Now, because of inflation, it's not so much. Okay? So, rich people use debt to gain productive assets, and then use the assets to pay back the loan with devalued dollars. And so long as I can see who the elites are in America running the show, I'm not interested in a lot of that political stuff. I'm interested in, are they going to spend a lot of money? And so, as this video has been made, 2020, we're still kind of trying to figure out who's our president, but it looks like Biden's going to be our president, and in his debates he said, I'll spend $1 trillion on this, I'll spend $1 trillion on that. Well, I think we're going to pump out a bunch of money, we're going to inflate the currency, and I can see which way we're going here. Okay? So it's not that hard. The central bank wants inflation, the president wants inflation, the Congress wants inflation. I think we're going to get inflation. Okay? So, it's a little more complicated than that. We'll get into that in the next few episodes, but this is how you get rich. You use debt to buy productive assets, and then you pay back the loans with devalued dollars.